Welcome back to another episode of Ideas to Human Better. I am your host, Eva Payne, and it's been a minute since I've been here and making some plans and switching some things up and finding my own flow. And a project that I have been sitting on for a while and super excited about, I've decided just to start, because isn't that what I teach? Lay a brick every day. Just start working towards things that bring you joy. And one of the things that brings me joy is figuring out what the heck this life is all about. I love going into deep dives into places that people won't go sometimes, just to hear information and see how it all fits together with whatever the bigger picture really is. So with that being said, the project that I am currently working on is what happens after our last breath. So I want to talk to different people with different perspectives and find out what they think happens to us after this life, after our last breath here. And I met a gentleman, Paul Johnson. He owns Wildish. It is an herbal botanical store in Portland, Oregon. And I first met his brother, and then through his brother, I met him. And synchronistically, we had a conversation around this topic. And that is what this podcast is all about. I think there are interesting people all over the world. And when we open up our hearts and our minds to just getting to know people and sit behind their lens for a few minutes, it's really fascinating what you might find. So I hope you enjoy this episode of Ideas to Human Better with Paul Johnson.
Well, I'm Paul Johnson. Moved around a lot as a kid, got a lot of good experiences, and always been a seeker, and philosophy has always interested me. Been a part of a couple esoteric orders, the Rosicrucians and the Gnostic Association, and then dove into Buddhism training, and then Taoism trainings. Kind of landed a bit on Taoism for now, and feel pretty good about that. Feel pretty connected with that. And then professionally, I've been in the healing arts and construction my whole professional life. So I started out in personal training, into Qigong and meditation, and I taught Qigong meditation for a while, along with doing massage therapy, biodynamic craniosacral, and then herbal medicine has always been a consistent love of mine, and I've just kind of landed on that as well, which goes in line with the Taoism. Taoism kind of led into Chinese medicine, so that fits well.
Where does this all come from? So I want to start with that. Where do your beliefs come from? Is this something that you were taught when you were younger? Did you have some experience in your life that kind of led you down that spiritual path, or what?
Well, nobody in my family was really interested in this stuff, and nobody in my family was interested in medicine either, or herbs. It seemed to just come from within myself as interests. If you want to believe in souls, maybe that's it. Maybe it's just the way that I like to think, and always been fascinated with human motivation. I think a lot of it has to do with having family members who have mental health conditions, and just really loving them and wanting to figure it out. What are the mechanisms behind all of this? How can I help them? And just always been fascinated with that. Not sure where it comes from, honestly, but just.
Do you feel like it's been your whole life? Like since you were little, do you always feel connected to something greater than yourself, or being the seeker, or is it something more later in life you discovered?
Yeah, it was super early. I remember having a couple dreams really early on, maybe 4, 5 years old, that I woke up in the room that I fell asleep in the dream, and and this happened a couple times. But in the room there was this really large orb sphere thing in the room, and it scared the crap out of me.
Hmm.
And it was like it was this presence in the room that it felt omniscient, even though I didn't know what that was at the time. It felt like it knew everything. It knew way beyond me and my parents, which is all I knew who to look up to.
Hmm.
Uh, and I don't know, it's just a really imposing presence. And I had that as a recurring dream, and I'm like, what is this sphere? It was like this silver sphere just filling the room, and it was like it would move around at a pace that was like even scary. I don't know how to describe it. I was very young, but that did give me a sense of something like, wow, there are
Wonder.
these, yeah, and there are these non-physical presences that can show up when you're asleep and scare the daylights out of you. I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, and I think just feeling lack in my life and in my family, and wanting to kind of overcome that, wanting to kind of know the deeper realities to the situations that we find ourselves in. Um, I grew up very poor, and so there was a lot of lack in a lot of ways. Not enough love, not enough money, not enough
Mhm.
resources, and so kind of wanting to. I, I recently read this book about the history of magic, and it went through a whole
Mm.
timeline of magic. Really fascinating book. But they were talking about the people really interested in magic tend across history would tend to be people not in power. When people of the public
Mm.
felt over overly dominated by some, kings and queens, pharaohs, or government, they would often turn to magic to try to gain some of that power back. It's
Mm.
kind of interesting. We're kind of seeing that now. Uh, there's a lot of talk about magic right now. That's even one of those. I don't know if it's around your circles, but people are saying left and right, "Oh, it's so magical. That's magical. Oh, wow, that strawberry milkshake. Oh, it's just so magical." I mean, it's now a just really common adjective. I think there's
Yeah.
an interesting fascination with magic right now, and rightfully so. We want to take some of that power back. There's a differentiation that was taught to me from a light worker I took a training from. I think it's an important distinction and between magic and sorcery, and I think it's important because I've used this language ever since that was taught to me, and it's been really helpful. And so the differentiation is sorcery is attempts to affect change in alignment with the egoic will,
Mm.
and magic being attempts to affect change in alignment with a higher will.
Mm.
I think that's
Wow.
a really important distinction, and that feeds into a lot of my philosophical beliefs as well.
Yeah. I really love that. Let's go
Mm.
back to you talking like very beginning, and I actually wrote it at the top of my list. So it's interesting that you brought it up right away. So as we dive kind of into this, what is this all about and what's next? My first question for you, and there's no right or wrong. I just really, I don't even want you to think like, sometimes I feel like we put like barriers around what we want to say because we don't want to offend anyone, or we don't want to like, the whole idea for this podcast is to really go into someone's convictions. So whatever it is you believe about whatever life is to you and whatever's next, like I just want to honor that. And I think that's beautiful in and of itself. And I'm grateful that we have all these different viewpoints. I think that makes humans cool. So with that, my question to you is there a soul?
Well, I do hear your disclaimer, and I do feel like I want to just give an answer straight from the hip. Um, but I do want to give a little disclaimer too, that in my personal approach, I'm really cautious with beliefs, because I mean, what I tend to see in others and in myself is that, we have really deep fears being human, and feel to quiet a lot of those fears, we make beliefs, and I think they can be really dangerous and manipulative and delusional. If I try to believe something that I don't, I'm not a materialist by any means. Like, the invisible spirit realms are just as real to me as this physical realm. Yet I am really cautious with accepting beliefs, and I try to unravel some of the beliefs that I take on automatically. I think it's really, I mean, if we talk about the fall out of the Garden of Eden and why that was our fall out of harmony with nature as a species, tracing that back,
Mm-hmm.
I a good answer that I feel for that is the fear of the unknown. And when we have the fear of the unknown, we try to pretend like we know something. And then so we create beliefs, and then that feeds our actions. And I feel like that fear of the unknown, need to know, need to control, is really the cause of why we're destroying our own home, the earth, right now, is meddling in in natural processes that work just fine without our control. So I'm really cautious with believing things, just for
So
the
can I
sake of
ask
it.
you, am I hearing you say that you're someone who just brings in, you either don't bring in a lot of stuff or you bring everything in and you just let it all just sort of sit and you don't hold on to anything tightly?
Right. Yeah, the attachments to beliefs is the dangerous thing. I think it's fun for intellectual entertainment, and a lot of the spiritual traditions that I respect, Buddhism especially, they believe deeply in reincarnation and souls. Um, it's very real to them. I have no direct experience with that, so it's I just can't speak to it. I don't feel like I can speak to it. On one sense, I do believe that there are souls, and I can feel in myself, been here before. I there's this knowing within me. There's that had to have come from lifetimes of experience. Yeah, I think there might be another way of explaining why that is,
Hmm.
if we're open to that. I mean, if we didn't have a society or a culture that even presented the idea of a soul or an afterlife, if we never even had that concept entered into our minds, would we still think that? Maybe there's another way of explaining it, as we there's this field of energy, that the implicit order of things, just a non-physical energy field, that all of manifestations come from, tend to manifest from, that energy slowing, that energy in a field slowing down and accumulating into matter. So that's why we have matter. um, and being connected into that energy field may be how we tap into that inner knowing that makes it feel like I've been here before, that I have this particular collection of energy that is me that floats around and chooses to inhabit bodies. Maybe that's the case, or maybe we're connected to some kind of field, that 0 point field that they're talking about.
So do you think that, let's just say a soul, I'm just using that word loosely, could it, are you saying it could just be like an essence of you, a consciousness, and just a, like, is there a collectiveness of you, Paul, in this life? Like something that's going to move on to something else when you stop breathing? Do you believe that there's something, some essence, knowingness? I don't even know what word you might use.
In this life, there's definitely a collection of something that is me, as far as I can claim. I think I would say that I believe that when I die, what I could say for sure is that the energy and matter collected by my being in this lifetime becomes usable elsewhere when I die.
Mm.
That I can say confidently. I feel that, at least. you know, there's some, whatever it is that organized me into a human being, that the energy of me will disperse and the matter of me will become usable elsewhere. So that's the very least I could say. A step beyond that, I could say that we return to an oceanic human soul where we are mixed with the collective thought field that is the implicit order that tends to manifest as human bodies. I would believe that this thought field flows through each human, and this would be a reason for why we are all subject to the same array of human emotions and inner experiences. And the difference between humans as we manifest are in the nature, nurture, genetics, astrology, upbringing, glandular dominances, diet, lifestyle choices, and all that. But I may believe that all humans come from and return to the same oceanic human soul.
That's really beautiful. Do you think there's individualism within that, or do you think it's more of a collective knowingness? I thought, I had this thought one day, and this is why I ask. I was watching my son's cheerleading competition, and I'm looking at all these kids who put like their heart and soul into this routine, and they're out there and someone's going to win. And that feeling of like working so hard and winning at something and getting that trophy. And for this moment, I thought, I don't ever have to go through that experience, because I think I'm going to know exactly what that's like one day without having to live it in this life. It was this sort of thought of, whatever you experience in this life, you're feeling your knowingness, I too will be able to tap into that, feel that, know it. I don't know. There was some sort of feeling about that somewhere else, some other place. Do you think, is that how you're kind of seeing this sort of collectiveness, where it's just this sharedness of everything? Am I making that up, or is that what how you're
Yeah,
view it?
I, I, I think so. Yeah, I mean that that as humans we do share all the same experiences. I mean, we're capable of feeling all of the same things. I mean, the reason why that we feel certain things that we do, like I might have a set of baggage that is different than yours,
Mhm.
or a series of themes in my life that are different than yours.
Mhm.
We all have a relationship to a lack of resources and an abundance of resources. For example, we all have in a relationship with feeling significant as a being and feeling insignificant as a being. So we're all subject to the same relationships to um, to the outer world. Um, so yeah, it's all right there. It's all, we can tap into any of it. The reason why we do tap into a similar pattern of themes, like in my life, I look at the themes that consistently pop up, and it does seem karmic. People say karmic,
Mm-hmm.
and that, in its simplest terms, is cause and effect, which you can't really argue that. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
question. Karma is not it shouldn't even be a debate, honestly. It's not even a belief. We live in a cause and effect universe, no question
Mm-hmm.
about it. So, uh,
Do you think that can carry
yeah,
over though, if from lifetimes, as if there are lifetimes, let's just presume that. Some people say karma, it's you're going through something now because of something you said or did or whatever in some other existence. Do you think it carries with you into this whatever? If you thought you've been here before, I've had this knowingness of before, do you think you bring any of that karma stuff with you here?
I think we bring the karma of the collective.
Mm.
So it's like, I would believe that we are a drop out of that ocean, and the drop returns to the ocean. And when
Mhm,
the drop comes back out and makes another life, subject to the karma of the
mhm,
collective.
mhm.
But I don't think that when that drop goes to the ocean, those same little bits that made you will come out exactly as they were. That made you, it will be mixed with the whole again, and then another drop will come out. That that's what I would think.
Okay, I love that. Okay, so let me ask you this. You're sitting there, you're 99, it's your whatever, I don't know, you've lived this really long life, and here you are, and you're going to die. Like, this existence is going to end. That moment after your last breath, what transpires? I
I
mean,
mean,
just take
there's
a stab at it, because what do we know? If from your
yeah.
perspective, from the knowledge and wisdom you have gained, to your best interpretation, what do you think you're going to experience, if anything?
I mean, I have heard stories of people with near death experiences that seem to be pretty common, consistent experiences that people have when they die. So I'm inclined to believe that that might happen to me, as some light of tunnel that I float toward somewhere. My life flashing before my eyes, um, and maybe a feeling of pure love. That's a common experience, like a love that they have never experienced, and just unfathomable. Yeah, I think probably nothing. As far as my consciousness goes, my experience as I know it now will end. So Paul will no longer have its experience as he knows it. That energy that is my consciousness, I feel, will dissolve, disperse into the rest of consciousness, and my physical body will deteriorate and get eaten up with the earth, hopefully.
Yeah,
And
right? Hopefully.
I do believe, and this is from my training with Dzogchen, is that consciousness is a fundamental quality of space, the element of space. I heard once a New Zealand philosopher presented, because there's a whole spiritual and materialist debate about what is consciousness and all that.
Mhm.
He proposed, he's like, I'm probably wrong, but he proposed that consciousness is a fundamental quality of matter, that that consciousness is inherent in all matter. Well, which I respected him saying that, because it's like probably an unpopular thing. But in Dzogchen, they had figured it out long ago that consciousness was a fundamental quality of space. So it's all there. It's all permeates through everything. Consciousness is everywhere. The universe is alive. and sensing. And so my consciousness that inhabits me, the consciousness that passes through my brain and that my brain can interact with that fundamental consciousness, I feel that when I die will disperse into the entire field that's already there.
Do you think that's an automatic thing, or do you think there's free will?
I think it's automatic. I mean, I don't think we have a choice over whether that happens or not.
So, like,
I do.
if there's a light, can you choose not to go? I mean, that's a
Oh,
choice, right?
yeah. I
Or do
mean,
you think
if you
no?
so like with the people that have those near death experiences, they come back
Mhm.
soon enough to tell us about it. So they weren't dead for very long. Their consciousness didn't leave for very long. So we don't know what will happen long term. We get these glimpses short term, but they may be at that place where they can decide. They're on the edge where it's like, oh, you're not quite dead. Like you could come back in your body and enliven all your organs again.
Do you go? Do you, Paul? Let's just say you pop out, there's some whatever your beingness is there. You feel drawn to this thing. Do you just go?
I feel I have no choice to go to if I'm to that point where I'm not coming back in my body. I'd like to report a near death experience. If I'm dying, I'm dead. That day comes. I feel like I will have no choice what happens to my consciousness or energy. I think it'll just be a dispersion back to the inherent consciousness that pervades space. I think it'll go right back to it all
And then
immediately.
whatever from there will be, will be. Is that your thought?
Yeah, I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe that I'll be. And I know I've heard compelling stories from my friends, and they've seen like handles of water faucets turning and turning on a shower, and from a really old house that's known to have like cupboard doors slam and all this. Um, I don't quite believe it. I don't quite believe it. I'm open to it being the case. I've never seen a ghost. Even in my own house, everybody here has said they've seen ghosts here. And I've been here by myself, pitch black, and I've just like stood in a room of pitch black and just like show me. Like if you're around, like let me see you. And I got chills up my spine and everything, but I've still never seen anything. And I want to see them, and I'm like, but it just never comes. So I just I can't speak to if ghosts exist or not.
So let me ask you about this. Is maybe off the beaten path a little bit, but what about dimensions, other realms, do you think that stuff is legit also then? I mean, could ghosts or whatever, just other life, energy being something live somewhere else other than what we physically see and touch here?
I wouldn't be surprised if there were multiple dimensions. I hear them talking about this in science fiction, but also a little bit in science now about multidimensional realities and some of the greatest spiritual traditions talk about that, where everything is happening, all possible realities are happening simultaneously, which
Mhm.
is really interesting, and there are just, I don't think we know enough yet. I mean, maybe we don't have the right gland in our brain, like dolphins have extrasensory glands that we don't have. Maybe we don't have the right apparatus to be able to view these things yet. So I
Mhm.
simply can't speak to it yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. And it would be so fascinating, so interesting. I
Mhm.
want to believe that, and this is where like the belief things come in where I'm cautious, because it's like,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
just
It
because I
sounds
want to
fun.
believe it, yeah, like, oh, that makes my life seem more interesting now. Where it's like, that to me seems like a knee-jerk reaction to having feeling bad about having a boring life,
Hmm.
or a mundane reality. Like, nobody wants to believe that it's all just material world and we just die and nothing happens and blah blah blah, boring.
That's it.
A lot of materialists believe that. A lot of people believe that still, but and I think they're being overly cautious and 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 not being open. But then there's like kind of the pardon the judgment, but like space cadet new age hippies that are just way off in other dimensions, and they say that they're Pleiadians from another planet. I'm like, no, you're not. Like, I'm not a materialist, but like, you are an earthling,
Wait, you can
okay?
hold
You are
space for a lot
here.
of things, but not for that? Why not? How do you know? How do you know they're not?
I think they're delusional, to be honest. It's just like, you are an
Oh,
earthling. You are here. You are here now. Be here now. I think that's delusional thinking that takes people away from reality. Yeah, I think delusional thinking can cause suffering. Some of these beliefs sound really nice, but I've heard really messed up things from these new age communities. Like, one guy was facilitating a psychedelic integration ceremony, and he like tried to convince this young woman that he was God, and that she actually was in love with him, and she just didn't realize it yet. But he could see, he knew. It's just like, this is how far it gets, where it's like super
yeah.
manipulative. Or like, you see somebody you're really attracted to, and you use this new agey spiritual thing to say, oh, I'm so intuitive. I, I can see all the past lifetimes we've experienced together, and so we're meant to be together. Here we are, we've met each other again. Like, that kind of nonsense is like manipulative power things. It makes you feel like you're this super intuitive, like spiritual person, which brings you up, and the other
Mhm.
person doesn't know, so it makes a power thing. So I think it can be damaging and dangerous and manipulative like that. So I can see that extreme. I can
Yeah.
see the materialists extreme as well. But from my training with Buddhism, the Buddha was, you know, he was so grounded, and he taught people to experience life as it is, not as you want it to be.
Mm.
And that is a value of mine that I've accepted, that that feeds my beliefs and makes me cautious towards other beliefs. I just want to, yeah, be in that reality, be grounded in reality that I experience.
I love that. Can you tell me? I've heard people talk about like people who are atheists, don't believe in God or anything beyond even this life. And then they'll have some kind of psychedelic experience, something, whatever it might be. And they say it is like so transformative that they can no longer not believe in something else. So what is that then? Is that really something else in your mind, or is that the reactions of just the human body and the brain and the plant medicine, the whatever it is the person consumed, just causing together and it causes this experience for us to, or is that experience real? Like, are they really seeing or experiencing something else in their, I don't know, field?
Uh-huh. I think that's a beautiful thing when that happens. I want that to happen more and more, where a materialist, and I have some respect for materialists who don't believe something that they don't have experience with. That's valid. That's so valid. Like, if you don't, now in the day of fake news and everything, we can just say whatever we want, and it's just like, it gets so far off of reality, where it's like, please only speak to what you've experienced, you know? Like, the world would be so much more sane if we all did that. And so I have a little bit of respect for that, and I really love when they have breakthrough experiences where they're finally getting that personal experience that shows them these invisible realities, the dynamics that are happening on a non-physical level. Um, the most impactful experiences for me, aside from psychedelics, have been from the biodynamic craniosacral. I mean, I've experienced things with my consciousness and the consciousness of the people that I work with that, I mean, that brought me to tears, and that just like, it's like beyond the shadow of a doubt, like that happened in the invisible field between us, sometimes where I'm not even touching the person, but these interactions that are at play in these invisible realms. And so I've
Okay,
been
now
that
tell me about that. I know a little bit about cranial sacral stuff, but I don't know a lot. So tell me what is that experience? And then when you say something happens, like what does that look like?
craniosacral is a type of healing modality that works with tides of consciousness. And there is a concept of the breath of life, which can be observed easily in plants, where we see fluid movements within plants moving from one end of a plant to another, 50 seconds one direction, and then it just stops and reverses directions for 50 seconds. And so there's this movement that happens, and it's some kind of life force movement, but you can observe this in all life forms. And so they call that the breath of life. And many spiritual traditions speak of this. In Christianity, God breathed life. You can see him, and is it the Sistine Chapel where he's breathing life
Mm-hmm.
into people. Um, in Japan, the kamikaze, aside from being a suicide bomber, is actually the real kamikaze is the it is a great wind spirit that flows, and that's what they were trying to, as a plane, they were trying to like connect with that. They thought they were doing the will of God for them. North American Native Americans will talk about the Great Spirit, which is a great, will qualify it as a great wind. So there's this breath of life concept um, that flows through us, and so we work with this breath of life, get it moving through the body, and it has to do with consciousness. And so we use our attention. It's not so much an energy practice. We don't like to call it energy medicine, although it's easy to call it that. Biodynamic specifically works with consciousness. And so we use our attention. Yes, where attention goes, energy flows. So energy is definitely moving, but we're focusing on consciousness. So um, I'll give an example of my nana. So my nana and I are really close, and we've had a good connection personally. I'm her favorite. No, I'm just kidding. But just we've always felt we're special to each other, and so later in her life, I started giving her craniosacral sessions, and she had really great benefit. She's a busybody, kind of a worrier, and so after the session, she would report things like, she said, "I'll be sitting in my chair and then just relaxing for the day, and then I'll think of something to do, and then I'll get up and do it." So there's that urge of like, thought comes in, need to do something, get up and go. So there's like this fight or flight response, or a little bit of adrenal response there. It's a stress response. And then she said, after our sessions, I'll be sitting there and have a thought of something to do, and then I'll get and then just like sit back down and just take a breath. So that's a type of effect that can happen, is some relaxation from those automatic responses. Well, one example in particular, we were both sitting, she got two rocking chairs side by side in the den, as grandparents do. And then she's sitting in one, I'm sitting in another. And it's just a sunny, beautiful day and warm. And we both she falls asleep in the chair. Well, yeah, she falls asleep in the chair like a nap, and I'm sitting there, and I choose to do some of this craniosacral work with her. I didn't ask her, but we had this. We're close, and I know she appreciates it. So I started to feel in to our consciousnesses together, and I started breathing at her rate, and then I started slowing my breathing rate. Her breathing rate slowed. Sure, she's taken a nap, so that could happen. But I started dozing off myself, just getting in such a relaxed state. My eyes were dozing down, and I could tell as I like, she was fully asleep, just like down, and then I'm like dozing down, and I feel the consciousness in my body as it like flows up. It like awake, how you get awakened from a nap kind of thing, like that. You like doze off and then up. Well, when that would happen, I wouldn't make a noise. There wasn't a breath noise or anything like it wasn't. There was no noise, and she was completely asleep. But like when I come up like that, she also came up like that at the same time. It's like our consciousness was in sync, and they were flowing together in this wave. She didn't wake up fully, but her head would come up when mine would, you know, and and you could just feel that in syncness, and it's like, yeah. And some other examples, when I have my hands under somebody's head, I do this heart chi building, and I have it go down my arms, down the insides of my arms, and I move this heart chi very slowly, chest to shoulder, shoulder to elbow, elbow to wrist, and I take minutes to do all this. It's very slow. And then by the time that cultivated heart chi gets into my palms, right from my wrist to my palm, in that very same second that I move it from wrist to palm, 9 times out of 10, the client will have a physiological response. And it's usually in the form of some kind of twitch. When sometimes people are falling asleep and they have a little twitch, that's the nervous system sorting something out. It's integrating something, and it's sorting something out that it needs to. So, again, 9 times out of 10, when I go from wrist to palm, they'll have that physiological response. Really fascinating. There's no other movement that happening other than what's happening in my consciousness and what I'm cultivating through. So those kind of experiences show me that this stuff is like, it's there, and it's moving. It's moving through us all the time.
Do you think that humans are or could be telepathic?
Yeah, if consciousness really does pervade all space, then that's all accessible. I mean, uh, so the 0 point field they've come up with in quantum physics now, it's been talked about many times before in other ways. The field, there's the the Akash, there's Indra's web. You know, the different traditions have talked about this kind of field, that an energy field where everything that's definitely everything that's manifested has a representation in this field. So like in this field, I imagine this plane of energy, and there's electricity running through, kind of like lightning kind of zapping through, and there's collections of it in some places, and if it collects enough, it'll become a thing. It'll become a particle. and and So if that field does exist, then yeah, we can absolutely tap into that field, and information sharing like at least the speed of light, if not faster. I do think
What
that.
what's a synchronicity to you? How do you define that? Do you think what does that mean? Do you even think about synchronicities?
Yeah. Well, so at the very least, I view synchronicities as coincidences that
Mm-hmm.
are meaningful to our life.
Mm-hmm.
So I I am living my life. I have an ego. I have a journey to my life. I care about my life, my well-being, my relationships, my connections. That's meaningful to me because I
Mm-hmm.
have this life that I have to take care of. So when I see coincidences happening or things that line up in such a way that it's like, oh, that's special because I have to take care of this body. At the very least, it's that. And that's rightful to say, a coincidence that's meaningful to my life. It might not be meaningful to your life. You're
Mm-hmm.
like, Paul, I don't care that you saw the same car that the the woman of your dreams drove and it drove right into you, and that means you're supposed to be together forever. Like, like people grab on to things. They want
Yeah.
more meaning to their life, and we really want meaning, and so we tend to like add this meaning to some of these life experiences, and I think that's okay. Unless you take it to that extreme, like, oh, I'm so intuitive, and you and I have spent 8,000 lifetimes together, and of course we're meeting again, and so this means we have to be together. Like that part is like, all right, hold up a little bit. Um, so, but so the coincidences that are meaningful to my life, at the very least, that I can say for sure, and at the most, nothing happens for a reason, or nothing happens for no reason. Like, everything happens for a reason, and it's all this perfect web, and the universe is friendly, and it's conspiring in your favor, and not everybody else's favor, but in your favor. Some people talk like that, where it's like they think the universe is very partial to them as a being. Um, I don't think the universe. I mean, I think we are a fruit of the universe. We are a product of the universe. We're not some entity that comes from a different universe or a non-universe that gets popped into our mother's womb and out into the world. We are totally a fruit of the universe. So how could we are one with it, in the same way that one of the cells of our liver is one with our whole being, not separate like that. So maybe it is all connected, like, and reflections. I feel like reflections have a lot to do with that question of synchronicities. With Indra's web, like a spider web, and each of the intersections, there's a drop of water. And each of the drops of water being a 360 orb, like, a drop of water will reflect
Mm-hmm.
everything from a 360 thing. And depending on your orientation to that drop, you'll see a slightly different reflection. And so that
Mm-hmm.
everything in this web is reflecting itself. So surely we find, we may call it synchronicities, reflections that are meaningful to us and that resound into something. If maybe I am a dewdrop in that web and I am reflective of everything else in that web, then I surely will see things that resound with me and my path, and I'll appreciate that. And maybe that helps us get closer to feeling that, the reality of that connection with that whole web.
I love that. Thank you. Okay, next question that's popping up now. You're talking about meaning. So, what is this all about? Like, beyond whatever's next, since we don't really know and we can only just conjure up some ideas. What is this? What is this? Like this existence right now? What is the purpose? Is there a purpose? Is there a meaning? Is it just randomness and just go ahead and be a good person or don't? I don't know, whatever. Do what you want to do.
Yeah,
Just a life. What are your thoughts around life in general? I guess.
yeah. I love this question. Well, two of my favorite spiritual leaders have simple answers for this, and that feel just about sufficient to me. One of them
Mhm.
says the purpose of life is to be happy. The other says the purpose of life is to serve. Um, I prefer the latter because if everyone connected with that purpose to serve, we would have a very beautiful world. I think to really answer this question, we have to first explore what we really are as beings. And again, we are most surely fruits of the universe. Even the iron in our blood that courses through our veins comes from countless star collisions and unfathomable amounts of violence and destruction that eventually reorganized into new order. That's the only way the iron is created. And so, we are not souls from outside the universe dropped in. We are a creation of the universe. So, if that's true, then our ultimate purpose must be aligned with the purpose of the entire universe.
Mm.
If you create a meaning or purpose from the perspective of a separate egoic individual, then you can just make it up. You have that as a choice, being that the mind is capable of believing an illusion that its body is not from the universe. We have that as a choice. If you just make it up, fine. It's up to you. It's your life. The problem is that living from that egoic will most certainly bring you suffering.
Mm.
Um, and so, thinking of the universe, and if we are this fruit of the universe, then what is the purpose of the universe? And then let's try to align with that. So, observing the universe as we can now, modern science is great for this. Some of the spiritual teachings can inform us. The universe, we can see, likes to go through cycles of destruction, disorder, and then reorder. So through that cycle, we see the evolution of creation. Sometimes it requires destruction, in order to reorder into something else, and that there is an evolution. Um, so another thing, the universe, if you want to call it a creator or say that there is a creator, it seems to like to create other creators. Definitely, as far
Mm.
as we can see on this earth, you know. So creation is a purpose, creating more creators. Uh, so
So to
we
serve and create and be happy is, I mean, if
well
I'm putting it in a nutshell.
well I will I'll sum it up. At the end. I don't necessarily take those first two purposes for my own, that the spiritual leaders, but I do appreciate them as entering the
All right.
conversation.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Me too.
one more thing is that the evolution of the universe tends to create more advanced products over time.
Mm.
So, I mean, seeing that life on Earth has evolved to create more aware beings, us, then maybe another purpose of the universe is to become more aware. And maybe the
Mm.
universe creates more complex beings in order to experience a greater diversity of awareness. The awareness that a tree has, the awareness that a mosquito has. So I
Mm.
guess my short answer would be that the purpose of human life is to destroy, create, and become more aware.
Wait, I don't like that you said destroy. That
I
makes
know,
me
I
sad.
know, I know,
So
I know.
can you
Okay,
so tell me
so
make me feel
thank you.
better about that, because right now
Okay,
I'm like, "Oh, I
okay.
just don't think I don't want war. I don't want to destroy anything. I just
I
want everything
know,
to be good."
I know. Me too. But so evolution requires it. So if you're unhappy with our current American empire, for example, or our
Mm.
current corporate capitalist economy that we have, it's going to have to be destroyed, and there will have to be a disorder in order for a new creation to happen.
Mhm.
So, I mean, just as our liver breaks down serotonin into its constituent parts in order to make up another molecule later that we might need. Destruction is just a part of it. And I do define destruction as catabolism. We break down a muscle cell when we exercise
Mhm.
only to create a stronger muscle.
Mhm.
Um, destruction I include in revolution. I also include sleep and rest, and dying. You know, dying is required for new life. So, fear of death, fear of breaking down. We need to grieve these things, and we need to allow them and see it as a part of the whole of creation. Things need to break down, and there will be periods of disorder, and then there will be periods of reordering. I mean, even our solar system now was had to have been so destructive before. So,
Mm-hmm.
how much destruction had to have happened for us to even have our life? Even the iron in our blood example, countless star collisions. So destruction is a necessary part. And so here's a duality. You know, the nature of the universe, I feel, is very dualistic. There's it's full of dualities. So creation and destruction is one of them. Expansion and contraction, expression and reception. These dualities, they just have to exist. So sometimes we as human will need to destroy things in order to create.
What do you think, that we're the pinnacle? Like, do you think there's something else out there that could destroy us and just view us as like, yeah, it's part of destruction. Like, who cares? Planet Earth, blow it up, start over. We could use those resources for something else.
Yeah, it's possible. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think there's an alien that's going to come and think they're going to need to blow us up. Um,
But do you think
Probably not.
we would do that ourselves? Like, just do you think like there's a need for war? Do you think there's a need for that kind of destruction in the world? Oh, are you really saying yes to that?
Sorry. I
Man,
do.
I'm really this one's tough for me. I like to think
Yeah.
I'm an open-minded person, but war and me, all right. So really, like, the taking of another life and killing and all of that, like, that's all it's all
Well,
part of it, huh? Do I need to find
well,
some acceptance with this? Because it's really tough. I feel like we need to evolve past it. To me, it feels primitive. I feel like there can be a better way,
yeah,
but
yeah,
you think it's
yeah.
maybe part of it.
Well, unfortunately, it's part of it, and I do agree with you that it doesn't. I think we're talking socially right now, right?
Well,
Where
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like,
Sorry, I'm just moving
you
into
know,
that part.
the liver is still going to need to break down
Yes.
serotonin. We need that destruction in order to have new molecules, or else we will die. So there's destruction that is absolutely required for all the beauty that
Mhm.
we see now.
Sure.
So socially, we're talking this suffering, the
Mhm,
destruction socially.
mhm,
I don't think it's required, but I view this suffering as a teacher. There's this saying that's floated around in my life, and it's really benefited me. If you have a big enough dream, you don't need a crisis. It's
mm,
if there's not enough conscious attention paid to your life path, your higher self will call in a crisis to break things up, to give you the motivation to direct your life in an appropriate way. The problem is
mm,
when we are living through the egoic will, then we will create suffering. It's the egoic unconsciousness that's
mm,
most likely responsible for the most suffering that we experience as humans. So as long as we have that egoic unconsciousness floating around, then that suffering will happen as a teacher to us. And it's only when we've had enough of suffering, once we've had enough, like too much
mhm.
suffering, then we can give it up. Then we can surrender. And with that surrendering, then we can have that allowance and acceptance. And then grace. I think the duality there is suffering and grace. So if you don't have enough grace, then you might need a crisis in order to give you the motivation to get things aligned with that higher will.
So how do we have a little bit less of that in our lives? How can we be more intentional about creating a life that isn't in alignment with that need for a crisis or suffering and can just have more flow, as I like to say? What's the secret sauce to that?
Well, I think one of the most fundamental aspects of that is that's been most helpful for me is observing the mind. The more I can observe my mind and what it does automatically, something as simple as somebody cutting me off in traffic, and what does my mind do? Or I anticipate a pleasurable experience, but then it doesn't happen or it's taken away from me. What does my mind do? So that observation, I think, is really fundamental to avoiding that kind of suffering. Then we get rid of the egoic unconsciousness, and we don't have to act out of it. So it's self-awareness, observing the mind, I think is really fundamental to that.
Mhm.
The Buddha laid it out quite nicely, and it's even in Taoism, the causes of suffering being craving, aversion, and ignorance. In Taoism, they talked about guarding against extremes of emotions, especially desire and anger. And they also promoted
Mm,
the observation of the elements in your environment so that you can harmonize these elements. So, again, he says, view reality as it is, not as you want it to be. And so, with craving, with desire, you want something that you don't have.
mhm,
So I want something that is not a part of reality. With aversion and anger, we don't like something that is here. So
mm.
that's not reality as it is. So that's going to be a cause of suffering. And then the ignorance part, which is probably the biggest cause of suffering, is that egoic unconsciousness. Things that we
Mhm.
just are yet aware of.
So if you're someone who has, I'll just call it like the monk mindset, like you're able to control your emotions and how you respond in situations. So that isn't as much of a challenge. Like sure life stuff happens and you don't know how you're going to react till it happens, but hopefully for the most part you don't go to crazy town. That's what I call it, crazy town. Um what about the doingness? How do you line up with that in this life? How do you line up with you running a store, an herbal botanical shop, or doing the cranial sacral stuff? Like how how do you line all those things up so to bring in that service, to bring in that happiness?
Well, the doing this, I would think just again aligning yourself with a higher will and not the egoic will.
Mm.
Yeah. And that goes in with the purpose, meaning purpose conversation we had, where, if I'm motivated by satisfying my egoic desires, I will have temporary pleasures and then upset, and the cycle continues. But if you can pair, of course, you're not going to get rid of your ego, and you got to take care of this body in life. So if you can at least align it with some kind of higher will or that essential nature of the universe that we talked about, that I feel could be a pretty skillful way. So just being conscious about that. What? Uh,
Do you do you think that there's like a I don't want to say a right path, but do you feel like there is something that Paul should be doing or could be doing in this life. And then there's something that Mary, and there's something Joe, and that is more in alignment for you than for someone else. And when you say higher
Yeah.
self, like, I mean, I get what you're saying, but I'm Mary sitting home going, what, I just graduated high school. What am I going to do with my life? Like, tap into your higher self and talk, like, make it real for me in that person. Like, here I am. What do I know to do so that I can have this most meaningful experience in life?
Yes, I do find that quite important, and such a good question for this liminal time that we find ourselves in, environmentally and societally. We're all in this in between time where we don't know what to do. And so I liked what Charles Eisenstein said. He said, in a liminal time like this, you can do nothing, which
Mm-hmm.
is okay. um, if you do something, just make sure it's not out of the old way.
Mm.
Okay, so I do want to recognize that, this liminal space, it's very confusing. And I think everybody wants to be recognized for some particular gifts. I know I do. And that's really important that people are recognized by others. And I would encourage people to recognize their loved ones for maybe specific gifts that they observe, um, in their loved ones. That feels really nice. Like a birthday gift, if say like you could buy somebody a birthday gift, that goes so far. What if you were to write down everything that you observed with that person as being really special and unique as a gift to them, and just give them the gift of recognition?
Mm.
That I feel would be really special. I would feel that that would be a nice gift, recognition.
Mm-hmm.
And other than that, I do feel that an optimal path for a person would include self discovery in a way that helped to self realize and self actualize. So, realizing the self is that recognition of special gifts, and then to actualize it is to do it. So, whatever tools you like to use, if it's the Enneagram or astrology or gene keys or human design, I've personally found gene keys to be really useful in describing unique gifts and special themes that most likely show up in your life. And you use that. Our particular, and there's, so that's nature, and then there's nurture. So if we have some suffering in our life, or some thematic suffering, these
Mm-hmm.
recurring themes that cause suffering for us, say it's abandonment, for example. Well, you look for the gold in it. You look for value in it. Like, one thing that I've had to deal with, it's been really hard, that I've had to grieve through. I don't need to say what it is exactly, but I went through all the stages of grief several times, round and around the stages of grief. And then I was like, except for the acceptance one, the final one. And, and I'm like, what the heck? So I go back and I look again at the stages of grief, and then I see this little snippet about the acceptance part where it said a recognition or realization of some benefit from the situation. And so that was a really big turning point in that grieving process, and kind of a reflection of all the suffering that we experience is, what's the gold in it? What's the value in it? What's the lesson here? What's my value that's not being what's my value or need that's not being met in this situation? It's causing the suffering, it's causing the grief. So say it's abandonment. I don't like abandonment. It's like tearing me up. And then what's the gold in it? Well, it means I'm valuing connection. I'm
Mm-hmm.
valuing commitment, like sticking together, sticking through it when it gets hard, not just banishing somebody, not just abandoning somebody. So that means I value connection and commitment. So
Mm-hmm.
just like take the gold, like what are you going to do? Think of the suffering experience your whole life. Yes, grieve it properly, cry it out, feel it fully, and then take the value, take the gold from it.
Yes. I love it. I have this acronym for the word love. It's one of the chapters in my book, and it's live open, value everything. And
Ah,
that's what I think. Like that, I was driving to the gym one day, and I was like, universe, okay, if I had 5 minutes to talk to every single human, what would be the most important thing? And that's what like popped in. And I just thought, value everything? Like, come on. And like,
yeah.
as I've sat with that for however many years now it's been, I just like I'll be in the middle of something horrid and I'll be like, there is value in this. There is value in this. Like, I don't have to know what it is right now, but I know somewhere in the future I'll be able to look back and go, okay, that's what I learned, or that's why I experienced that, or because I experienced that, I now understand and experience and appreciate the opposite, or whatever it might be, So there is value
Yeah, nice.
in, and I love how you say that, like find the gold in it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, nice.
All right, we've been on for a little over an hour now. I feel like I could just keep going and asking you these questions. There's very few people that I can have really deep conversations with, so I appreciate that you took this time and and spoke with me and gave me all this wisdom of yours. Is there any anything on your heart, in your mind that you're like, oh, I want to say this?
Just keep going.
It's not like from Dory or what, Finding Nemo. Just
Is
keep
it
swimming, just keep
swimming? Yeah,
swimming.
yeah. Really, it's the stuckness part, and getting stuck in that egoic unconsciousness and cycles of suffering. Um, we want that flow, and with psychedelics, that gives us that opportunity to get some flow to those emotions that tend to stick around, and that heaviness
Mhm.
that creates inertia and our reactions to suffering. I don't want it, I don't like it, I can't stand this. So we kind of stop, and we let some of these painful experiences hold back our gifts. And I feel that if we don't share our gifts, then other people in the world really do miss out,
Mm.
So yeah, find your gifts, express them, give space for grieving and rest, and just keep going.
Paul, I love that. Thank you so much. Very inspiring. Thank you for doing this and for talking with me today
Yeah,
about all these different areas and topics and stuff. I do appreciate your time very much, and I appreciate you tapping into your gifts and being willing to explore all these different ways of seeing, the different filters, if you will, of like life and the ones you can put on. I think you've chosen some good ones, some ones that, are supportive and helpful and useful and loving. And I appreciate that, and just your career choices and the things that you're putting out into the world. It really is. It does very much feel service oriented. I just talked with one of my friends the other day. Her name's Bonnie, and I was telling her about you and your store. And I sent her your website, and she's like, I'm going to be in Portland in June. And I'm like, I will make an introduction. You can go and meet Paul. So
all right,
as I
good.
find people, I like to be a connector. So as I find individuals that I'm gonna like, someone will walk in and be like, some woman Eva sent me here. You're like, oh yeah, okay, her.
Yeah,
So anyway, I do
cool.
appreciate what you're doing, and the work that you're doing, and that you bring your family into it. I mean, I love that you had Daniel there for a while, and then I don't know what he's doing now, firescaping, he said, or something. And then your other brother, Jonah, was there working on stuff. So that's beautiful that you incorporate your family into the stuff that you're doing.
Yeah. Thanks for that recognition. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk about this stuff, and you're holding this platform. And the more we talk about this stuff, the better we can, get it out of the unconscious and get more consciously connected with our values and our beliefs. So yeah, thanks for that opportunity.
Yeah, of course. My pleasure. This excitement of what this conversation can look like and how it can really bridge these gaps of us versus them. I'm right, you're wrong, my perspective, my religion, my belief, my what, and just being able to share across a platform that you can come and get all different perspectives in one place, and they're each supported, like I just think that's super important. I don't know how it's supposed to help or what it's going to do. I just feel like I need to do it. So I'm just trying to stop questioning it and just start taking steps in that direction. And then if it's meant to be, I think it'll have a life of its own, right?
Yeah. Great job with just doing it. We really do need to be entering into more dialogue and talking it out with each other and with mutual respect. Yeah.
Yes,
beautiful.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to another episode of Ideas to Human Better. I am your host, Eva Payne. That was Paul Johnson. You can find his wonderful store, Wildish Botanicals, online, wildishpdx.com. Thank you so much for being a part of our audience and for sharing this message with anyone that you think might benefit from it. Remember, take what works, ditch the rest, and always stay set to love. Have a great day, everyone.